Hi, everybody. Welcome to Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan from the Leather Elves, and I'm here with Jack Pine from High Redbird. Hey, Jack, how's it going?
Hey, Robin, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. Doing all right. It snowed today.
Oh, well, that's um different.
No, I wish it was different. So I want to welcome everybody tonight. It's tonight's topic's a little different for us, but I think it's applicable to all birds and it's something that people need to think about. So, Jack, is there anything we need to remind people about before we get started?
Yeah, so just like we do every single week, we do want to remind you guys we do our flock talks every single Friday night at 7 p.m. We have Diane on tonight. She calls this her date night. We are very, very excited to have you guys here. Um, if you guys have not already liked the Leather Elves page on Facebook, you want to make sure that you do that because if you do that, it will give you a notification whenever our live streams start. I actually just got a notification right now. So you guys won't miss out. Your phone will let you know. So if you get busy, if you forget, you'll still get a notification to let you know. Now, if you get busy or you forget because you're actually doing, important things, not that Friday Night Flock Talk isn't amazingly important. But we do understand that sometimes you get busy. If you guys subscribe to the High Redbird YouTube channel, you can also watch all of the videos that we have done in the past. They are all put together in one playlist. So, my recommendation for you guys, if you're planning like a road trip, you could have an epic road trip playlist. At this point, I think we've got I think it's about 15 to 16 hours worth of content on there for you guys to listen to. So, yeah, you definitely don't want to miss out. But we always encourage you to be here live. You can ask any questions, you can participate in the conversation, and just have a lot of fun with us.
I could get almost all the way to Texas with that. Almost. So, not through Texas, but almost to Texas. So, it's a lot to remember, but we appreciate you guys, being here every Friday night. And Megan says, "Happy Flock Talk Day." So Diane, you noticed that Jack's hair is Jack's a rose-breasted cockatoo, but I'm a African gray. Are you believing that? I don't know. Okay, I'll try to sell it. So what we're talking about tonight is modifying care for geriatric and special needs birds. And like I said at the beginning, it's really for any birds. It's something that we need to think about as the population ages, and we really need to kind of be aware of what to look for. So, Jack and I have talked to you guys before. Welcome, Judy. We've talked to you guys before about how when you care for animals, it should be all goal based. That's the bottom line. And the way that kind of dovetails with what we're talking about tonight is, you've got to think about what's your goal? What do you want to accomplish with this animal? And, Jack, what are some of the things that you take into consideration when you're thinking about caring for animals?
So, yeah, just like you said, what are you trying to accomplish with your animal? With the animals I work with, I have a completely different approach for, if I have breeder birds versus birds that are used for presentation versus birds that have been rehomed to me and I just want to give a good home for their last few years. So, I'm definitely going to have a different approach for all of those different things. Um, so there's a couple of things that you want to think about, especially if you're looking at older birds, birds with special needs, birds that come with a history that you're not that familiar with. Like Robin said, this does apply to everything, not just typically when people think of special needs birds, they have a very distinct image in their mind. But really, you can apply each of these tactics to a variety of things. So when you have plans for your animals, just think are those animals going to need any particular accommodations in order to make that happen? And even with accommodations, is that behavior realistic? So if I have birds that are breeding birds, teaching them to say hello and wave to a bunch of 100, 200 kids probably isn't going to be in line with what I'm planning for them. So definitely just think about those things. And with all of that in mind, try to pay attention to the stress that the animal is undergoing through all of that.
And I think too, it's about, you know, what's the accommodation? Is it something, if you're requesting a behavior, you're requesting that a bird do something, you're asking them to try to do something. Is it something that's realistic for them? All birds aren't created equal, and some of our special needs birds and special needs, like you said, Jack, has such a wide range. It can be, a birth defect, it can be an injury, it can be just simply the aging process, and everything gets treated a little bit differently. But you need to talk about whether it's realistic or not. Because we don't want to ask our birds to do things that are super uncomfortable. And one situation comes to mind. I was working with someone and asking a bird with a foot issue to step onto, to get onto something that's not super stable or that's not as steady. It's asking the bird to do something. And if you're doing good training and you're doing positive reinforcement, the bird's going to want to work for you and, work for that reinforcer. And so you're asking something, they're really trying to do it, but it's not something that they're actually capable of. So you need to do some assessment along with this, I think. And you mentioned stress, Jack. So we don't want to add stress to a bird's life that is already facing some challenges. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, I think that needs to be part of your goal. Your goal should be to minimize stress. So if you need to train a new behavior, if the long term diminishes stress for that animal, I definitely say that's worthwhile. But if you're just putting undue stress on an animal with no real reason for it, or you have to do a cost benefit analysis. What are you getting out of that behavior versus what strain is that putting on the animal?
And what's the animal getting out of it? I mean, we talk about, who benefits from this. Is it the animal that's benefiting because you're enhancing the quality of life by having them do a specific behavior? Or do you benefit because it's a really cute behavior and it's fun to show your friends? We use that term all the time about being bird centric. And in this case, you really need to be bird centric. It needs to be about the bird, and not necessarily about gee, I wish he would do this. I wish he would cuddle. I wish he would step up. You really need to think about why, you know, who's benefiting and why. That it comes down to that for me, asking, why am I doing this?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to focus on. Um, and again, that answer is going to be based entirely on your setup, your situation, your individual animal. So even if it's, well, my friend down the road does this with your bird. I don't know. I feel like that mom in a cartoon where I'm like, well, if your friend down the road jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? Um, you know, Utilize your critical thinking skills. Make your best
Absolutely.
decisions for you. Because I don't want to be that mom. Please don't make me that.
Don't be that mom. All right. So, we need to assess the stress level with these birds. I think it's important with all birds, but it's really crucial with these particular birds, with special needs birds and geriatric birds. And there's a lot of different ways you can assess stress. And I think one of the most important, you need to be objective. You need to have objective criteria, and then you need to have subjective criteria. And I think it's difficult sometimes to take that, the data that's on paper and really try to try to use that and not get emotional about it, because we love these guys. There's a reason they're in our life. And so we need to look at some factual information. So in my opinion, and Jack's opinion too, I believe, weight is the most critical way to assess stress. And if you see a huge fluctuation in weight, not even a 10% fluctuation, then that's something that's looking at the overall condition of the bird you really need to consider.
Yeah, I would say, to me, weight is the single most important diagnostic tool that a bird owner has at their disposal. Because when you
Mhm.
take into account how much a bird weighs and the speed of their metabolic processes, a change in weight can definitely indicate something going terribly wrong. It can be
Mhm.
your first indicator before something goes terribly wrong. The other thing we need to remind everyone, and I feel like we talk about this at least every other week, since our birds are prey animals, they're going to try to hide a lot of things from us. So, as we move on to some of the more subjective categories, those are definitely open to interpretation. But weight,
Mhm.
a bird can't hide that. I know we've tried it, I've tried it. I'm not going to put that on anyone else. But
It's all right.
has anyone else ever played the game of, oh well, I'm going to get on the bathroom scale. Oh well, we just changed the batteries on this scale, so clearly it's not measuring weight the same way. And in your mind, you know it is, but you're trying to find some way to rationalize it. You can try to spin it every way you want, but the scale's going to tell the truth on you. The same thing with our birds.
And Megan just said she started a weight journal for Gizmo, which is huge. I mean, big kudos to you for that, Megan. That's really important, because now you've got data. You've got data so that if suddenly something starts going not so great with Gizmo, we're hoping that never ever happens, but you've got that all journaled right there, so you have that information. I know Adrian wrote the weights and poop fecals, right? Who thought we'd be talking about that, so much, but we do, and you have to. So it's the how often, it's the consistency. You should be familiar with that. And I'm sorry, but it's true.
Yeah, and like even things like consistency, color, those will tell you critical parts of how your bird is doing. And that's also part of why, if you have multiple people in your home, it's important that everybody be on the same page, everybody be communicating, because there are times where a change in your bird's fecals may alarm to terrify you, depending on what they've got. Um, if a bird gets blueberries, I've had instances where with parrots where the blueberries make fecals a deep purple, almost black, which makes me question what's going on. Beets, I know beets are great for birds. I don't like feeding out beets because when I see the fecals of a bird that has gotten beets, I wonder, why is my bird bleeding out internally? Because there's these deep blood red fecals. Um, so all of these are things just to keep in mind, um, take into consideration. Fecals are definitely a great objective tool. If you need to for your vet, it's very easy to take pictures of fecals,
Mhm.
send them to your vet. You'll feel a little weird doing it, but I promise your vet will be thankful and able to process the information.
Absolutely. And Judy mentions here documenting diet changes and environmental changes in lighting, a new HVAC system, keeping those and then you can kind of see where the flow goes with that. I have to back up. Nick, can you pull that quote up from Diane? Because Diane, it was True Confessions time. Diane used to be embarrassed to say the word poop, but now she uses it daily when speaking to folks about their parrots. Awesome job, Diane. And I think from now on, if any of us see you in person, we will figure out a way to elicit the word poop from you. And I see Ann's on here too. So Ann, you're you live fairly close to Diane. That's the goal, is to elicit the word poop from Diane on a regular basis. So, okay, so poop is important. Who thought we'd be all talking about that all the time? So another thing is their body language. If you're doing good observation with your bird, which we've talked about before, their feather position, are their feathers all slicked back? And it's not just about, how it is a crest up on a cockatoo. Is it not going to, there are other things about feather position that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, so how a bird is holding their feathers on their body. Working with zoo professionals, you would expect it to be completely scientific. And there are a lot of times that start off with, I think we need to do this, that, or the other for this bird. It looks kind of dumpy this morning. It's that feeling of, that look of just, I don't feel my best. And you're going to be able to see that in how your bird is holding itself, in how bright its eyes are. It's not the most exact thing to point out, but it is definitely something you get a feel for.
Absolutely. And it's that consistent observation, attitude. So that's super subjective. His attitude's not the same. He's not as playful as usual, but it is something to keep your eye on, and it can help assess that stress factor. Their energy levels. If you've got a bird that's, the roadrunner that's constantly pinging all over the cage and out on the play stand and up over here and over there, those are the kind of things that you need to be aware of. Julie says, ADR ain't doing right. Absolutely. And Jack, there's a different one.
No, I had always thought there was. I had always hoped there was some technical term, because that's what we used at the zoo. That is what I have always known it as. And it was always ain't doing right.
Mm-hmm. And it's true. And you come to know that. And then, it's really important to think about, Judy brings up a good point, that stress impacts poop. It's something that is a scientific fact. We talk about, we got to bring the science into things. And even though we're not all, professional scientists, we still need to be aware of those kind of things and know the science behind it and why that's happening. Appetite. So what your bird eats on a regular basis. You're either measuring it out, or you just know, okay, it goes up to this line. If they're not eating the same way, that's something that could be affected. If they're not eating a particular thing, if it's, this is getting left out and it was always a favorite. If they're not, doing the normal routine, those are things that you just need to kind of be aware of. And if they're just not interested, if in those days you have when you're just like, blah, those are the kind of days. And if your bird's having one of those days, you should be aware of it.
Yeah. So the important thing here with all of the things that we just listed, as you observe your bird, you will get a feel for what is normal. It is if those things dramatically change. If one day weight has dropped, or attitude has dropped, or appetite has dropped, that quick change is, to me, what would be an alarming thing, and something to take into account. But, if a bird just looks a little dumpy, I have some geriatric Amazons that first thing in the morning until they finish eating breakfast, and they eat breakfast, they take a bath in their water bowl, and then they look okay. But yeah, first thing in the morning, it's looking a little rough, and that's par for the course for them. So it's not a cause for concern. But yeah, if that were to change, if that continued throughout the day, those would be things that I'd be looking out for.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot to take into consideration, and, assessing the stress. What do I want to do? How is this asking for this behavior affecting my bird? And then just general, we talked last week with Melanie about general wellness. those kind of things that you need to assess when you're caring for any birds, but in particular, special needs birds. So you want to minimize stress, but you don't want to completely eliminate it. It's not something that it's not realistic for stress to completely go away. You need to kind of keep a little bit in there, and it doesn't mean, oh, I can never give him anything new, I can never move him, I can never take him out, I can't do any of these things because he's special needs or because he's older. That's not realistic either, and that's not good quality of life.
Well, and I think we see that with people. How many people do we know that as they get older, do they have friends or children that will say, oh, you're not allowed to do this anymore, you're not allowed to do that anymore? And you see the reaction from those people, because they still want to do things. The same could be said for our birds. Our birds still want to engage, they want to act. So, you need to provide modifications to minimize that stress. You're never going to be able to eliminate it completely. And I would say they don't do well living in an environment with absolutely no stress because that's not natural. Um, but
And no, and it's
give them that.
And it's not challenging at all. I mean, that's one of my big things when it comes to any kind of enrichment, or I really like to challenge the birds, not in a negative way, but they do need some of that. We all know how smart they are and how active they are. And we really need to put some kind of challenge in there, regardless of the fact that they may be special needs. So, I think the phrase, Jack, that we've talked about is, don't focus on what your bird can't do, but what they can do. And, really take that moment or that one thing that they excel at, despite the fact that they've got this special need, and really play with that, work on that. If you can expand on that one thing safely, then that's what I would suggest doing.
Well, and I would say that change in mentality can make a world of difference for both you and your bird.
Mhm.
If you start thinking of things that way, you're going to get excited as you get your bird to do one more thing or something that you didn't think they would do before. But if you go into it with, oh, well, no, my bird is special needs, they can't do this, that, or the other, and then they did something uh, that you have on that list, you may be upset. You may be scared that, oh no, that was going to go terribly wrong. We should have never done that. And, Robin and I do advocate trying to think through worst case scenarios, making sure that things are safe. But you definitely want to give special needs birds, geriatric birds, give them a chance to be birds.
Yeah.
That's part of why we like birds so much here. I feel like we talk about this every single week. Like there is something almost magical about them, their personality, their intellect, their ability to interact with the world. Don't take that away from them.
Right, absolutely. And it's not about stopping things. It's about just changing things. So some of the special needs, that we wanted to talk about tonight, feather destructive behavior. Feather destructive behavior can turn a bird into a special needs bird. If you've got a bird that's overpreening, plucking, hopefully not, but possibly mutilating, that becomes a special needs issue, and you may need to make some adaptations. And what's the rule, Jack, about feather plucking birds?
Oh, I know this. I know this. I know this. Um, so with something like that, before you come to like a specialist or a consultant like me or Robin, seek out a veterinary consult and rule out a medical issue. Because we can try to help you with any type of behavioral issue, but if there is an underlying medical cause, no amount of training, changes in enrichment, changes in routine, it's not going to fix that medical cause. So definitely rule that
Right.
out.
That's a big one. I mean, because, I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that say, oh, my bird's feather plucking and I've got to stop this and you've got to fix it. Okay. And the first thing I say to them is, we've got to rule out medical, because if I can't train away an illness, I wish I could, because I would have taken care of this COVID thing a long time ago. But you can't train
Target.
away an illness. But yeah, right. We target the virus, we'd be golden. But you've got to rule that out first. So now we're gonna trust that we've ruled that out, and we've still got this bird that's got some feather destructive issues. And my go-to is enrichment, because think about it. It's like any behavior modification that you do, you've got to replace that behavior. So if you've got a bird that's constantly over preening, I have people say to me, my bird just grooms all day long. Okay, so let's find something that's super exciting, super enriching, give them that to do. It at least takes part of their day that they're not over preening, or foraging. I feel like I push foraging for everything, but it's kind of like the target training of enrichment, right? So if you've got a bird that's foraging for something that they really want, they're not going to be plucking. It's almost physically impossible to make a search for food or to work at getting something out of a device and pluck at the same time.
Yeah, I completely agree. Foraging is one of those things that it's become like, I almost feel like it's a buzzword that people think, oh, you're just including that because it's, the new thing that all the cool kids are talking about. And it's the fun thing about foraging is it is so many different aspects of enrichment rolled into one. There is dietary enrichment. There is destructive, tactile enrichment. Your bird's getting to interact with something, move something, destroy something. You can incorporate visual enrichment. You can incorporate olfactory enrichment. Are they smelling things that are inside what you are hiding? So you are encompassing so many forms of enrichment that you are providing so much stimulation for your bird that they're going to be hard pressed to, you know, focus on just destroying their feathers.
Absolutely. And it's not a bird, but years ago had a dog that had hot spots, and he would bite himself till, it got to be infected, da, 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 da. And we started giving him all of his diet and foraging activities. And it didn't completely do away with the chewing behavior, but it lessened it. It absolutely made it more manageable. And, it's about how you're probably not going to erase any of these special needs that your birds have. They're not going to go away entirely. But if you can lessen that need, or I don't want to call it a disability, because it's not. It's just a different situation, and you just need to manage it differently. And I think, Jack, so when you've worked with birds with the feather destructive issues, have you ever had anything, so they don't look super pretty all the time. They're still beautiful, and they're still smart, and they're still interactive. Was there anything that you had to do special for them that people might not think about?
Okay, so actually, Mika, the umbrella cockatoo that I've shown you guys on here before, he has a bald patch on his chest. He plucked that before I got him. I have been able to do some work with providing him the ability to fly around and do other things. That bald patch has lessened, but it's still there. We always expect he will have something there. So most of my birds are kept outside. They can, on the Gulf Coast, unlike where Robin lives, where it's snowing, most of my birds can be kept outside year round with just windbreaks, heat lamps or heaters, shelter from the rain, but they can stay outside. Mika, with that bald patch, once temperatures start dropping below 55 degrees, I don't trust that he's able to, control his body temperature well enough to do that. So with a bird that is plucking, I would pay particular attention to temperatures around that bird. They're not going to have the same ability to control their temperature. And also pay attention to things like drafts. So if you have that bird
Mhm.
in a cage in your house and it's in direct flow of air from like an AC vent, Obviously, that could be problematic for any bird, but especially for a bird exhibiting some degree of feather destructive behavior, it could be a much bigger issue.
Absolutely. And so, I think feather destructive behavior is something that's scary for a lot of people. Melissa says it's a big fear for her. It seems very difficult. And it can be difficult, but it's not insurmountable. And it's also not, if you've ruled out medical, you've really given it your all with foraging and, trying different approaches, and your goal is to kind of lessen that plucking. If you're not 100% successful, it's not a death sentence for your bird, unless they get to a point where it's self-mutilation, and then, you've got a much bigger issue on your hands. But if it's plucking, in some ways, it's almost a cosmetic issue, and you just need to kind of work on that through changes. But it's not something to, lose your mind if you come downstairs and suddenly the bird's got a few feathers missing. You're finding feathers on the bottom. It's not a molt. You're like, oh, and then, the next day there's a few more feathers. Okay, so it's a red flag for you that you need to think about it and maybe do something about it, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, so I'm sure this is something you have encountered. I'm sure people watching, this is something they have encountered. Cockatoos are notorious for feather destructive behavior, particularly as a response to stress, because cockatoos can be a little bit difficult to house. They can be very destructive. They can be very loud. They produce a lot of dust. A lot of people will get them, take them into their home for a little bit, and then it's not working out. And that bird goes to another home, and then another home, and then another home. And by that point, by the time they're somewhere that is willing to provide for them, even if you're providing enrichment, foraging activities, all of that, by that point, it may be too late for a lot of those feather follicles. And Robin, I don't know about you. I have met some almost completely naked cockatoos that still have a ton of personality. They're engaged in their environment. They're willing to interact with toys. So while feather plucking is something to take into consideration, it's something to work through. I think it's important to remember that feather plucking does not impact necessarily the attitude and the behavior of that bird.
Right. I mean, if you can assess that bird's, all the things we went through, that whole list, and you all get a check off on all of those, then it's not a huge crisis. And I remember when I first got in the business, I was at a show and there was a veterinarian there, and she had a little perch and she had a naked chicken on it, and it was a cockatoo. And I remember I walked over and I was like, oh, and she kind of looked at me and I was like, uh-oh, I'm a newbie here. Uh-oh. And she's the veterinarian. And she looked at me and she said, why did you say that? And I said, well, because he has no feathers. And, she goes, did you see him hopping around? Did you see him chattering and talking to everybody? And did you see him? He was eating his food and playing and stuff. Yeah. Oh, so he's pretty much okay. This was a bird that it had become completely habitual. He had plucked them all out. The follicles were ruined. They weren't coming back, but his quality of life was still good. And so I think sometimes it's plucking can almost be more of a human hang up than a bird issue. It's something we don't want to ignore it, but it is something to think about in those terms. And, I want to point out, just mentioned tonight, Judy Sawin is on, and Judy is from Avian Retreat. And Judy does an amazing, I think Judy has probably experienced all of these things that we're going to talk about tonight in birds that have come into her care. And Judy's got some great advice. Yeah, there's Judy. And it's really, she's really right on as far as handling these things, and it's not a crisis. These birds are going on and it's just fine. And, Nick brings up a good point too, that owners shouldn't feel guilty. It's really not about, if the bird happens to have a plucking problem, and asking for ideas, asking, for help from someone. There is nothing wrong with that. And I think that's, something that we want to foster here, is that people really think about, if you've got a problem, go to your community, go to, come to Jackerai. Some of the people that are on every Friday night, talk to them about it if you're friends with them on Facebook. But feather destructive behavior is not something that, you have to hide away in the dark room because it's horrible.
Yeah, I definitely don't think there should be a stigma there, especially because since the first thing we told you guys to rule out is medical issues, sometimes there are medical reasons why birds are plucking. So and that's, I feel like a lot of owners have this idea that, like, oh, if my bird is plucking, everyone's going to judge me and say you're not providing enough enrichment, you're not providing your bird a good life. And it could be you adopted a bird that was already plucked, it could be there was a medical reason, it could, like, there are so many things there. And I would say, to Robin's point, that reaching out for help is a really good sign of your strength and your commitment to provide an optimum life for your bird. If you were trying to hide things and say, oh no, nobody else can help me with this, I know everything on this, you're definitely limiting yourself on having options and things that you can do to provide that best life for your bird. And I mean, that's what we're here to encourage.
Absolutely. So feather destructive behavior, something that, it's not necessarily going to go away in a day. It's one of those issues that it takes a lot of commitment, a lot of work to maybe make it go away, but it's something that, you can definitely live with if it won't go away, as long as you're addressing it. The next special need that we would like to talk about is foot injuries, things like arthritis, bumblefoot, just general mobility issues. Some birds, Wendy, you just knit them a sweater and go forward. There it is. That's the answer right there. Great. That's a great attitude to have, Wendy. And so with things like foot injuries, or sometimes it's a birth defect, it may not be an injury. It may be something, that this oh, really? Bird was born with. Wow, that was difficult. Um, and, again, seek vet care if it's an injury. If it's bumblefoot you're dealing with or pododermatitis, seek vet care. If you haven't already done that, that's like the first in most of these, unless it's a chronic thing that the bird came to you with and it's, a deformity or something like that, you've got to seek that medical care first. So there's such a
thing I
wide
want to add to that real quick. So since we recommend seeking vet care on just about every single one of these aspects for a couple of reasons. One, your vet can also help you come up with other ideas, other suggestions. I know there are veterinarians who have uh, specifically recommended some of the toys Robin makes as a means of dealing with certain behavioral issues. So, I mean, your vets are going to have different contacts, they're going to know different things, so they can help you with that. Another thing is, if you get a vet recommendation that to you it doesn't sit right with you, the good thing is you can feel free to ask another vet. Your vet should not be challenged or threatened if you just want to get another opinion, because again, it's all in the name of providing the best quality care for your animals. And the really good thing about, okay, like, reaching for a silver lining for 2020 here. We have all gotten very, very comfortable video conferencing, doing things with our animals. So while you can't do everything on a vet visit over the phone with a video camera, you can do a lot more than, just picking up a phone and relaying what you think you're seeing to a vet. So you could get a consult from a vet across the country just to get some more ideas from them. So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. That's great advice, Jack. So on the foot, and Judy says she's got some senior Amazons with arthritis, and it's a big deal. And it definitely is. This is a photo from a facility, a rescue out in the Midwest. And a bird came to them that really had some mobility issues, had arthritis, couldn't, wasn't able to get around the cage really well, wasn't able to perch. And that was part of the reason that the previous owner had relinquished this bird. And what the rescue did was they put these flat perches in, and they had ramps so that they could get to the perches. The other thing is they needed a cage that had horizontal bars. I mean, that's something we don't think about a lot. This is Rosie, and you can see Rosie's foot there is not going to work exactly as it should. But Rosie's also flighted, so Rosie can get around that way, which is, it maybe not work for everybody, but it is an option if you've got a bird that's not great on their feet. If they can get around flying and it's safe, then that's an option. But Rosie she needed a cage that had the horizontal bars, which you can see behind her. And she climbs up and down those bars, puts her feet in between, and uses those to move herself up onto the different perches. So it's really about making those adaptations. And with foot injuries, with arthritis, with bumblefoot, all of those things can be helped with some flat perching. It's really about adapting the perches so that they really meet the need. We've talked about you can't have all the same size perching. I mean, Jack and I have brought this up more than once, because then their feet are in the same position. And if you've got a bird with arthritis, this is not, the same size, the same position all the time is not going to work. And if you've got a bird that doesn't have full range of motion, can't open their feet all the way, a big perch, and normally, if you had a macaw, you'd probably want a bigger perch, to start with. That may not work for a bird that has arthritis. You've addressed some of these things, Jack, I'm sure.
Yeah. So the bird that comes to mind when thinking about this, I actually have a geriatric red lord Amazon that about 10 years ago, before we got it, had a stroke. So the entire time we have had him, he has had issues with one of his feet. As he gets stressed, if he gets overexcited, the foot will ball up. And then he has difficulty moving around. As he's gotten older, as his arthritis has progressed, he's just had a little more problem with that foot. One of the things that we've done for him is bird safe willow baskets. So they don't have any wire pins or staples in them. I can mount those inside his enclosure as perches. He can stand on the edge of them if he wants, because they're sturdy enough to support him. But sometimes he likes to stand in the basket, where that gives him a flat surface to have his foot. It gives him a variety of different textures and sizes. It's not something you would normally think of. So when providing things for a special needs or older bird, you may just need to think a little bit outside the box.
Absolutely. And I think too, one of the concerns that comes with mobility issues and things like that is that a bird will fall. The bird will fall to the ground from a height and get hurt or further injured. And I think that is definitely something you need to consider. And if you're doing something like a bridge or a ramp or a ladder, because all those things can help with mobility, be aware of how far, because the bird might fall. That's a distinct possibility. And so be aware of how far they are off the cage bottom. Or maybe you put something in the cage bottom that if they're not going to, pick at it, it's there as kind of a cushiony spot. We've talked about, arthritis is such a challenge. And I know Linda, who's on tonight, has a bird that has some arthritis. And she says she tried it, the flat perches, and he didn't like it. She couldn't get him to get on it. And that's definitely, an issue. So Linda, one thing I might suggest is doing some targeting with that bird, trying to target him to get onto that. And I'm sure, I know Linda's a great bird owner. And if you've tried that, I apologize. But I think it's really about making that flat. Once they get there, if it relaxes that foot for them, it's kind of like they realize, oh, this isn't so bad. And it may be that initial, oh, I don't know, and it may come across as, I don't want to do that. But you've got to kind of read that body language and see why they're behaving that way. What's happening with that. Bumblefoot. Yeah, Patricia, absolutely. It's a very important topic. Pain can affect behavior, leading people to misinterpret aggression. 100%. You know, I've worked with people that their birds will, they'll be nippy or bitey or, you whatever insert term here, and it can just be a manifestation of that pain. Yeah, I mean, Jack, do you have any suggestions, for getting birds to use those flat kind of perching or the willow baskets, things like that?
So, my best recommendation here, um, if you are the person that is used to interacting with that bird, watching that bird, something that I have found that works really well, get somebody who doesn't know anything about birds, um, and ask them to take a look at something. Because you, as the bird owner, are going to have preconceived notions of, oh, well, this bird should like this because it's this type of wood and it's got this texture and it's good for it. But you may have somebody who knows nothing about birds come in and say, oh, well, but that feels really hard on my hand, or it it's something is really hot because it's right next to a window, so like that perch is getting really hot, or it's in a draft so it's getting really cold. They may find something like that that you're not even really thinking of. So bring in somebody who doesn't really know anything about birds, or um, you know is not as in tune to that particular bird, and see if there's anything else that they can pick out. It's the same reason that Robin and I encourage you guys, record your training sessions, have somebody else take a look at them to see if there's anything that you're just missing.
Absolutely. And, one last thing on the foot injuries and bumblefoot too. If you've got a bird that's experiencing bumblefoot, they're going to need something that's a little bit more cushiony. They're going to need something on their perch that might make it a little bit softer. I think you'll find if you've got a bird that's got any kind of sores on their feet or experiencing pain, they're going to gravitate to those rope perches. They're going to gravitate to the things that have a little bit more give to them. And you can create that give with some vet wrap and some cushion under the vet wrap. And, it really helps with getting them to a different, if they're always on one perch, it'll sometimes help get them to a different perch, someplace a little different. And the other thing I just wanted to mention, foot toys. So foot toys are great for keeping those feet exercised. If a bird can open their foot and they get a foot toy, it will help with maintain dexterity.
Yeah, and one other thing that I want to point out there, training. Think about the training that you are doing with your birds in order to utilize their feet to maintain that flexibility, that dexterity. If you train your bird to wave, you can then have that be part of an exercise routine that you do with that bird. Have them pick
Mhm.
that foot up and down. When they pick that foot up, you can fully look at the bottom of their foot, which could be an issue for a bird with pododermatitis. If you
Mhm.
need to, you can train that bird to pick up and present that foot, so you can use some sort of medication prescribed by your veterinarian on that foot. So just think about those things. Training can help you in a multitude of ways when it comes to something like bumblefoot.
Absolutely. And the you don't want to have to, we talk about again bird centric, you don't want to have to grab a bird to hold his feet, to look at his feet, to hang on to that. It's just not, it's a little bit more heavy handed than I would like to be. One of the easiest things you can do is get a bird to present its feet on a cage. They're going to be doing this anyway. And so if you can get a look at that, you can head things off at the pass, before they get really bad. And I know back a few minutes ago, Judy mentioned foot rubs on her bird for the birds with arthritis. And at the same time as if you've got a bird that's willing to let you mess with their feet, at the same time, you can look for that pododermatitis, that bumblefoot. And it's just again knowing your bird. Mitch said that a while ago. Really know your bird, know what it looks like, what you can do, what you can't do. Those kind of things are important to think about. So there's a lot of mobility issues and a lot of different things that can play into that. But some of the things we mentioned are the simple things to do. So I know Lori had asked about blind birds, and it's a challenge. It's absolutely a challenge. And I know that Lori is dealing with a bird that is blind. This picture comes from Southwick Zoo. That's where Danny, who we had on a few weeks ago, is from. And this bird is visually impaired. And the way that enclosure is set up, there's easy accessibility. The perching, he can go all the way around and make use of that whole enclosure by staying on a perch or by going down one of those vertical posts. And it's all fairly close together. They don't change up a lot. One of the things to note is, so there's enrichment in there. It's like, okay, we're obviously we're going to provide enrichment for this bird, but we made it so that it was accessible to him. You don't want to hang something. So I've said before, hang stuff in the middle of the cage. It's great exercise. Okay, maybe not for a blind bird, right? You want to think about that. This bird can go all the way around, can navigate around the whole enclosure, can play with the toys, and then food and water bowls are easily accessible. So it's common sense, but then you have to kind of put yourself in that position and think like your bird, and how would you want it to be set up?
I think one of the things to pay attention to with birds that are visually impaired, again, they're prey animals, so they can be startled. And if they don't have vision, you have to find other ways to help alert them to things. So if you're going in with an animal to do anything, if you're going into their cage, you can use something like sound just to make sure that they know that you are there. Obviously, if you had a visually impaired bird that was, standing right next to the door of its cage, and you just open the door of that cage, something a few inches away from it just moved, that can be terrifying. It could flail, it could hurt itself. We once had a Swainson's toucan that was missing an eye, just one eye, but it would sometimes turn and you would be on the side where it couldn't see you. And if you got too close to it and it didn't realize you were that close, it would become startled. So we would, tap walls, utilize sound to let the bird know where we were in the enclosure, if we were needing to move closer to it, so it could make the choice to move away from us if it wanted to.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go back to my go-to, the enrichment girl here. You want to provide enrichment that addresses other senses. And I think it's things like scent trails. I've talked about those before. You can lay down a scent trail, and we've done it with the bird in I believe it was done with the bird in this picture. And it can help lead them around the cage and have them utilize more of their cage, more of their play stand, more of their enclosure, if you lay down that scent trail by rubbing different scents on different perching. And so scent, we kind of forget about that one with birds. We use it a lot with reptiles, but we forget about it with birds. You want auditory enrichment. These birds are, so auditorily aware because that other sense is gone. And so enrichment for a blind bird is a different approach than one with full vision. So a scent trail, just in case anybody I haven't spoken to. Oh, there we go. A scent trail. So a scent trail is when you can take a chili pepper, you can take a basil leaf, Fritos.
That's what I had next to me.
Okay, so you take whatever that may be and rub it on the perching or on, where you want that bird to go. And then it's kind of like, follow the scent to the jackpot at the end. Those butterflies are clearly going after something yummy. So it's just, so Lori, it's just making a trail with something that is, has a fairly strong scent to it. That, cinnamon's another great one. You can, rub that around. It's not something you have to worry about that they're going to eat a bunch of something, that they shouldn't be. It's any kind of spice that you would normally use with a bird, you can create a scent trail.
Sweet peppers
So
are one of my favorites.
they are. Sweet peppers work. And it's that, anything that has kind of that oil or there's a feel to things that have a stronger scent, if that makes any sense at all. Scent at all. See what I did there? So the other thing is you don't want to do a complete furniture move around on your birds. So that's like when you go to work and you come home and everything in your house is moved, which on some days it wouldn't be so bad, but you want them, they've got to know where things are, and it takes that there's a sense that happens, and they know, okay, I'm going to go here and I can go this far, and they've figured that out, and you should be really proud of them that they've learned to negotiate or navigate the whole area. So you just don't want to move things around on them.
And that is definitely a safety issue for birds with visual impairment, but I would say that's something to take into consideration for all birds. And I think
Mhm.
we can definitely relate to that too. Just like Robin was saying, if you came home and somebody completely rearranged your furniture, you may not be having a good day. If you came home and somebody vacuumed and there was a new cake on the dining room table, that might be just fine. So
Right.
try to think about how much change you would be okay with, and think about that in relation to your birds.
Absolutely. So I hope that helps, Lori. I know that you've been asking about blind birds, and I hope that really will help some with the quality of life for your guys. So the next thing we want to talk about is beak issues, and beak issues are, you've really got to think about what you're offering. I mean, Jack, I know you've got somebody with a scissor beak at the farm, right?
Mika, Mika, that umbrella
Yes.
cockatoo. Part of why we have seen him so often, Mika has to go for a beak trim. The vet that does his beak trim is 5 minutes from my house. He has to go for that about every 6 weeks. So you see him pretty regularly for that reason. So I mean that's definitely something to keep in mind. Birds with scissor beaks, birds with beak issues. You do have to think about what they are getting, but at the same time, I would also say that doesn't mean completely eliminate things. You may need to just present them differently. So when I first got Mika, I was told by his previous owners that Mika could not have any nuts at all. He did not have the ability to open them. They had tried, it didn't work. Um, I didn't necessarily believe that. So I tried with things like almonds or walnuts. By pre-cracking them and handing them to him, he's able to get everything out of them. He just needs to get them started. So
Mhm.
maybe you need to provide your animal food that is pre-started. Maybe you need to cut it to be a little bit smaller. But at the same time, and I know this seems counterintuitive to some people, maybe you need to provide the food a little bit bigger. Um, if I were to do cubes of melon, that can be an issue for some of my birds if it's not quite the right size. But if I cut a watermelon in half, birds are built for taking their food apart. As long as there is something that'll hold it in place so they can rip pieces off, they're able to break it up. And sometimes the weight of that food is all you need. So definitely keep that in mind.
Right. So Terry's got Pandora, and Pandora is finally weaned, almost 3 years old, missing a lower beak. So Terry persevered with Pandora and made it work and was able to make those adaptations. And I can tell you that I know for a fact that Pandora plays with toys, because we've got a toy specifically named after Pandora. It was designed just for her. So it's, this is a bird that has some issues, but through Terry's perseverance and Terry really working with that bird, Pandora is living a perfectly normal life. So, it's nuts still give her trouble, she says. Yep, okay. And that's all right. You got to have some challenges that continue, right? So, what fun is life without those challenges? But I kind of feel like Pandora will probably eventually figure that out. So very cool, and nice job, Terry. So we've touched on some of these, issues. We've briefly covered things, but geriatric birds. So all of the above may happen for your geriatric bird. And you've got to be very consistent with things like vet visits, things like, you know, if something arises, your vet may be able to help you. It may be something that's manageable. It's just, okay, we're all getting older. I mean, Jack just, keeps doing his hair different colors and we don't notice, but we're, it's
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 gone
not
gray.
it's gone great. It's not my fault. But I think, it's not rocket surgery that we're all going to get older and our birds are going to get older. And we've just got to, keep taking maybe little different goals. I mean, Jack, are your goals with the geriatric birds you work with different from your young guys?
I would say that is very much the case. At this point, I have been taking care of animals for years. And I will Robin, um, and I will readily tell people, I have dealt with injuries and training things and all sorts of different aspects. The one thing I can't fix is an animal getting older. They are all going to get older. They all will eventually die. That is the reality of any animal you take into your care. I would say with some of those older birds, rather than having this, blue sky, this is what I want this animal to do. I want it to do this, and this. Sometimes your goals need to be maintaining. I want my animal to maintain its weight. I want it to maintain this degree of flexibility or dexterity. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a goal like that. If your goal is to make sure that my animal is able to move around just as easily as it was, if my animal is not in pain, those are
Mhm.
still worthwhile goals to work for.
Absolutely. And I think about, I was at a facility, a rescue facility, a rather large one, and they had a geriatric Amazon that had some mobility issues. And what we really, our goal for that bird was to get out and get some sunshine. They were in a good sized cage. They weren't able to the bird hadn't been able to access the outside aviary because of those mobility issues. And it was a flock aviary. So, he was the kind of weak link and they weren't so sure. And so what we did, we took his cage, we wheeled the whole cage out into the aviary, the flight cage, and we tricked it out with ramps and flat perching, and you could feel the positive vibrations that came off that bird when it got in the sun. And so for me, I didn't expect this bird to be flying around. I didn't expect him to be climbing up and down and up, around and swinging on toys. It was just to be able to sit in the sun. That was the goal. And so it's sometimes those little goals are what you need with a geriatric bird. It doesn't mean give up. It doesn't mean, oh, well, you can't do that because you're old. It just means let's look at what's realistic again. And
Yeah, and I think Lori said, uh, where is it? She can only hope with her everything that she will have geriatric birds.
yeah,
And I've actually had this discussion with one of our vets. It's simultaneously excellent and awful,
mhm,
because it means you have done all of the things that you needed to do. You have gotten over every hurdle in the life of that animal. And your reward is a more challenging experience that,
yeah,
um, you long term, depending on how you assess it, can't necessarily win, because we do know no matter what you do for that animal, it will get old. But think about it instead in terms of what have you provided for that animal? What sort of engagement have you given it? When you take into consideration things like that, then you see that, that animal has had a great life and you have provided that. So just try to remember that, because taking care of geriatric birds, making the decisions for them as you move on to what they need medically, it can be exhausting. Um,
Mhm.
I have no shame in admitting I have had times where I have called Robin, I have called other people, and I have had to make hard decisions for animals. And I don't need someone to fix it for me. I don't need somebody to give me another reason or another thing I could have done. Sometimes I just need people to be there for me, because it's hard and it's exhausting. So, for anyone who is watching today that has geriatric birds, that is working to provide the best possible care for them, please know that you have my utmost respect, because it is a very challenging topic. But I know we all do it because it is so rewarding. That's why we take care of these birds.
It absolutely is. And I think too, anybody that's listening tonight or that, is having that discussion about how do I care for a geriatric bird? How do I care for a special needs bird? There are times, and I know there are people who would argue with me, but you can't save them all either. And I think that's a very difficult discussion that comes out of caring for geriatric birds, caring for special needs birds. You may not get as many years as you want. It's never enough, but if you can say from your heart that the quality of life that you've provided for this bird is good, if not exceptional, then I think that decision, as difficult as it sometimes is, becomes a little bit easier. Because when that quality of life falls off, when that quality of life just isn't there anymore, you've got to talk to your vet. You've got to talk to the people that you care about, that you're close with, that are involved, or your colleagues that, you maybe work with. It's definitely something, it's a decision we end up making, um, in some cases. And you just have to be, again, sometimes you've got to pull out some of that subjective and make it objective.
Right.
So
And so
yeah, go
for
ahead.
anyone who isn't familiar with the term, so quality of life is used quite often by veterinarians, animal care professionals. It is basically everything that goes into your animal's life. So if your animals have medical issues, those would factor into their quality of life. If they are stressed, if they have issues like that, that'll factor into their quality of life. If they get a good diet, if they get regular enrichment, regular socialization, those are also things that'll factor in to their quality of life. So that's what a discussion of quality of life is about. And if you tell your veterinarian you would like to discuss your animal's quality of life, um, it's a discussion that you can have at any point in an animal's life, but it's typically going to be reserved for animals that are older, animals that have chronic conditions. You want to weigh the comfort and the happiness of the animal versus any issues they may be going through. So I just wanted to make sure everyone had a good overview on that topic.
No, absolutely. It is a term that we kind of throw around, but I know Wendy just said, as an ex-hospice nurse, you do the best you can until you can't. And I think that kind of sums it up, And I think I think probably most of us have been there, where you've had to make that tough decision for a geriatric animal, not just birds, but animals in general, and especially people who work professionally with animals. That decision has to be made sometimes, and it's not an easy one, but it's got to be an honest one. I think, as hard as it is, and as much as it, is miserable, and you go home and you cry and however you cope, sometimes you've got to make that decision. And it's the kindest decision to make. So we didn't really mean for this to turn into a sad evening. That was not the point. But I mean, I think Jack and I have always been honest with you guys about care and about animal care and what the reality of things is. And this is kind of where this topic leads to. So we wanted to touch on it a little bit tonight. So yeah.
And I mean, again, I think it's really important. It's really easy to get bogged down in the sadness of if you need to make a decision like that, and it can be very, very sad. But for me, at least, part of how I'm able to work through that is by instead focusing on what kind of life did that animal have? Did I better that animal's life? Because I think you'll realize that by engaging in all the different things that Robin and I talk about, all the things that we know you guys are doing because you tell us about them in the comments section. You're training, you're socializing, um, let's call it what it is. We are spoiling our animals. They are having a good quality of life for so long. So try to think about that. Hopefully that will help. And the other thing is, you know, reach out to anyone in your animal care community if you need to, because again, we've all been in those situations. We can talk to each other, but we can also just be there for each other.
Absolutely. All right. So now we're going to make y'all smile, hopefully. So we've got a trivia question for tonight. And tonight's trivia question, the prize for the trivia question is bouncing eggs. That's not how you handle eggs, Nick. Jeez, you got to be more gentle. Just saying. So the prize for tonight is a consult with Jack and I. If you for modifications for special needs or geriatric birds. So if you're living with those guys and you need a little bit of help, we would be happy to do that. So that's the prize for tonight. And the question is,
Oh, I'm supposed to do that part. Oh,
you can just read it.
um, um,
What is the single most important objective factor for assessing condition?
So yeah, Robin and I have talked about this numerous times for assessing the condition of your bird. Melanie last week discussed it with us as well. So it's not like this is a new concept. We have definitely talked to you guys about this again and again and again. We have typically said that this is the single most important thing to do with a bird, because it tells you so much about your bird.
Absolutely. Do we have a winner? Lori McFarlane. So we can work on your blind guys. Very cool. And actually, I think Lori, we owe you another consult anyway. So we're just going to spend a whole day with Lori is what's going to happen. But that's okay. She's fun. It's all right. So congratulations, Lori. And
Well, and we did have a lot of people who commented weight of the bird too. So
we did.
I think
You guys
that's
are paying
great.
attention. That's so exciting. I'm really excited about that. All right. So we want to remind you guys, we've got the big conference coming up. The BETS conference. It is June 11th through the 13th. And BETS stands for Behavior Enrichment Training and Science. You got to roll the dice, take a chance. We have some amazing speakers lined up. We've got Danny Larson from Southwick Zoo. We've got Dr. Susan Clubb from the Rainforest Clinic. We've got Miguel Santos from Zoo Marine in Portugal. Miguel does the bird show there. Miguel's also a former president of International Association of Avian Trainers and Educators. We've got Hilla Niemann, who is a behavior consultant from Germany. If you have not heard Hilla speak before, she is fantastic. And we also have two workshops. So Jack and I are going to be doing a workshop, a skewer workshop. So anybody that registers will get a skewer kit from the Leather Elves. So you'll have all the pieces you need. And then we're going to be doing another workshop, and it's going to be 2 days of so much fun. You can't stand it. And you're all going to be brilliant by the end of this, because I can personally vouch for all of these speakers. And Lori's already signed up. She can't wait. Ha ha ha. See what she did there? Um, she's a funny one, that Lori. Jack, do you want to add anything else about the registration for the conference?
Well, and okay, so I know, so Sheila just asked. So one thing we also want to point out, if you are signed up for the conference, we will have recordings of the sessions available that if you're a registered attendee, you'll be able to access them um, even outside of that conference window. So, if you have something that comes up on one of those days, you can still get that information. But it should be a whole lot of fun. We have put this conference together with what people have told us they have been missing. So we are trying to provide not only the educational aspects, but the toy workshops are going to be hands-on things for you guys to do. There will be a happy hour component for those of you who just miss hanging out and talking with bird people. Because I know that's one of my favorite things that I miss from conferences. So we definitely hope to see you guys there. It should be a lot of education, but also a lot of fun.
And so Michelle asked, what are the hours or the times of the conference? The conference is running, it's Friday evening, and then it is Saturday and Sunday. Okay, help me with the time zone. So it's starting, I believe, at 8 Pacific in the morning, and it's and 11
But
on the East
Eastern,
Coast.
yeah.
So, and like as Jack said, you'll be able to access the recordings of it, and just please make sure you sign up early enough so that we can get you the kits. They'll all go out about a week and a half before the conference, so we can make sure that you've got what you need for those workshops. And when Jack and I were working on this, we really, like you said, we wanted to find out what people were looking for, and what you guys had said to us over the weeks, that you really wanted to learn about. So we've tried to include those things. We've tried to make it as engaging and as interactive as we can. So that's it for tonight. Unless, Jack, did you have something else?
Well, and I will say, if you guys would like to know more about the conference, first of all, like Robin said, you want to make sure you sign up early because part of your registration is those materials for the workshops. But you can also go to visit theleatherelves.net, and we will be updating that with more information about the conference. Or you could always, Nick is so lovingly putting up that QR code that'll take you right there. So that'll tell you more about our speakers if you want to see their bios and the summaries of their presentations. Those will be updated as we get closer to that session. So all of that information should be ready for you guys. And of course, we're going to keep doing our Friday night flock talks. So Robin and I are here. At this point, I think we've been committed by other people, which is not how Robin and I thought that would go. We thought it would happen, just not in this way. Definitely thought I would have been committed by other people by now. But Robin and I will be putting together Friday night flock talks for quite some time. So if you guys have particular topics you would like to see covered, let us know. You can reach out to Robin either through the Leather Elves. You can reach out to me through High Red Bird. Make sure that you like the Leather Elves on Facebook so that you can watch live, you can participate with the conversation. I definitely think that's important, that getting to participate with the conversation lets us know what information you guys need. Of course, always subscribe to High Red Bird to watch the videos later on if you haven't already. But, thank you guys so much for making this such a wonderful opportunity for me and Robin to share with you what we have learned, what we have picked up over a combined years of experience. We're actually we're getting close to being able to measure it in relation to a century, and that just kind of hurts.
That's true. Um,
Um,
so yeah, thank you guys. And next week we're doing parrot fun and games. So that ought to be fun. We really love your input, and we want to just thank you and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Maybe it won't snow here. I'm kind of hope that's my goal for the weekend is that it not snow. So spring is truly here. I'm just waiting for it. So have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and we will see you next Friday night. Take care.